Hello friends, welcome to the world of science fiction and forgotten words, Alien Universe. Don't forget to like, subscribe and never miss a new stories and movies from this channel. Thank you.
The surgical lights inside orbital station Kepri never flickered. They were built by a civilization older than most stars, powered by crystalline cores that had burned for millions of years without failure. Precision was their pride, perfection, their religion. But on this night, as Dr. Vale stepped toward Surgical Chamber 7, the lights trembled once, then again. The pulse was subtle, almost unnoticeable, but to Vale, it felt like a warning whispered through metal walls. Machines did not hesitate. Systems did not stutter. Something inside that chamber was already breaking the rules. Dr. Vale paused at the threshold, his elongated fingers hovering over the biometric panel. He had performed over 12,000 surgical examinations across 17 species, from liquid-based organisms to silicon bone giants. Nothing surprised him anymore. Pain was predictable. Anatomy was logical. Biology was a puzzle with answers waiting beneath the skin. That belief had guided his entire career, turning him into the most trusted surgeon of the collective. Yet tonight, his lower pair of eyes kept drifting toward the sealed chamber door, where a glowing red symbol pulsed softly. Unknown specimen. Unknown. The word itself felt primitive, almost embarrassing. The collective cataloged galaxies. Entire ecosystems were mapped before their suns even cooled. For something to arrive without classification meant either a catastrophic database failure or a discovery so unusual that reality itself had not prepared for it. Vale pressed the panel. The door dissolved open with a whisper of decompression. Cold air rolled out first, carrying a scent Vale could not identify. It wasn't chemical decay, nor sterilization fluid, nor pheromonal secretion. It was warmer, organic, faintly metallic, alive in a way that made his neural ridges tighten. Inside the chamber, the medical team stood unnaturally still around the central examination platform. None of them spoke. None of them moved to greet him. That silence unsettled him more than any alarm could. "What is the delay?" Vale asked, his voice modulator translating his harmonic clicks into the station's common speech. No one answered immediately. Finally, Technician Rel shifted, her translucent skin dimming in a display of unease. "It arrived 36 cycles ago," she said quietly. "Recovered from a drifting transport capsule at the edge of collective territory. Life signs were weak but stable. No external weapons. No defensive biology detected." Vale stepped closer. "Then why is the specimen not cataloged?" Rel hesitated, and that hesitation stretched the air thinner than vacuum. "Because, Doctor, we cannot understand it." Vale felt irritation flicker through his neural pathways. Confusion among junior staff was common. Panic was not. Display. Preliminary scan. A holoscreen ignited above the platform. Streams of data scrolled past. Molecular density, organ mapping, neural activity, cellular regeneration rate. Vale's eyes moved rapidly, processing faster than any machine on the station. At first, the results appeared ordinary. Carbon-based. Structure. Bilateral symmetry. Fluid transport system. Nothing remarkable. Then he noticed the contradictions. Bone density fluctuating between brittle and reinforced states. Neural activity spiking during unconsciousness. Cellular decay occurring simultaneously with accelerated repair. Pain receptors distributed everywhere, yet suppression chemicals present internally. It was as if the organism was designed to break itself and fix itself at the same time. "That is incorrect," Vale said, assuming equipment malfunction. "We recalibrated 7 times, Rel replied. "Every scan returns the same pattern." Vale turned toward the examination platform. For the first time, he truly looked at the patient, The being was smaller than most interstellar species, its form wrapped in a neutral containment fabric. Smooth skin, sparse protective covering, fragile-looking. LIMBs, no claws, no armor plates, no visible toxins. It appeared defenseless, almost unfinished, like an early evolutionary draft accidentally preserved. Vale felt a brief wave of professional relief. The unknown was simply underwhelming. This organism is structurally vulnerable, Vale concluded. Why the concern? Rel's bioluminescence flickered again. Doctor, observe the cranial scan. Vale reopened the holodisplay and focused on the brain. For several seconds, he said nothing. The neural network was dense beyond expectation, layered with regions that activated even during rest. Memory clusters intertwined with emotional processors, decision pathways overlapping with sensory recall. But what disturbed Vale most was the instability, patterns forming, dissolving, reforming constantly, like a storm trapped inside tissue. This level of internal conflict would incapacitate most species. Vale murmured, "It doesn't." Rel said, as if responding to their voices. The patient shifted slightly on the platform. A shallow breath escaped its lips. Monitors chimed softly, translating vital signals into collective metrics. Stable, alive, dreaming. VAE. L stepped closer, studying the face. There was something deeply expressive, even in stillness. Micro-movements beneath closed eyelids, subtle muscle tension, the faintest tremor of emotion without stimulus. It suggested an internal world far louder than the silent chamber. What is its designation? Vale asked. Rel swallowed. Recovered data from the capsule contained one word. Vale waited. Human. The term carried no immediate meaning, no evolutionary file, no diplomatic record. Just a sound, brief, and strangely heavy. Vale activated his surgical interface, metallic tendrils unfolding from the ceiling like patient serpents awaiting command. The examination would be routine. Tissue sampling, neural mapping, biochemical profiling. Within one cycle, the organism would be understood, categorized, archived. Predictable. Logical. Safe. Yet, as Vale reached toward the human's arm, the surgical lights flickered again, longer this time, dimming until shadows pooled across the chamber walls. Every monitor glitched simultaneously. And for the first time in his entire career, Dr. Vale felt something unfamiliar rise within his perfectly ordered mind. Not curiosity, not confusion. Fear. Because the human's eyes were still closed, but its heart rate had just increased in perfect synchronization with his own. Dr. Vale slowly withdrew his hand, staring at the monitor as if it had betrayed him. The rhythmic pulses on the screen were unmistakable. His own cardiac node beat once, and the human's heart echoed it a fraction of a second later. Again, and again, perfect alignment. Vale ran a diagnostic on his personal biosensors, expecting interference, signal leakage, some rational explanation that would restore the universe to its usual order. The results returned clean. No cross-channel contamination. No environmental resonance. Nothing that could explain why two separate organisms were now sharing a rhythm. Did you alter the monitoring grid? Vale asked, his voice quieter than before. Rel shook her head immediately. All systems isolated. Independent life sign streams. Vale turned back to the platform. The human remained motionless, breathing gently, its expression calm, almost peaceful. Yet its body was participating in a biological conversation no one understood. Vale felt irritation, trying to reclaim control of his thoughts, but beneath it lingered that thin, persistent thread of unease. Begin baseline tissue scan, he ordered. Mechanical tendrils descended, projecting soft beams across the human's arm. Data cascaded onto the holodisplay. Skin thickness, cellular hydration, microvascular flow. Everything appeared ordinary for a carbon-based organism, fragile, even inefficient compared to collective species. But as the scan penetrated deeper layers, anomalies surfaced again. Scar tissue mapped across muscle fibers. Microfractures healed imperfectly. Old inflammation markers, repaired tears. The body told a story of repeated damage and recovery, cycles of breaking and continuing without optimization. This organism has endured extensive structural trauma, Vale observed. Rel dimmed further. Medical history unknown. Capsule logs corrupted. Vale leaned closer to the display. Why was it alone? No one answered. The silence returned, heavier now, pressing against the transparent chamber walls. Outside, stars drifted like distant embers, indifferent to the mystery unfolding inside the station. Vale shifted his attention back to the neural scan, determined to anchor himself in measurable facts. Initiate cognitive surface mapping. A gentle pulse of energy passed through the human's cranial region. On the display, neural activity bloomed like lightning across a storm cloud. Images flickered into rough translation. Fragmented sensory memories, emotional imprints, incomplete scenes. Vale expected incoherence typical of unconscious organisms, but instead he saw patterns forming with startling clarity. A small hand, gripping another hand. A bright sky above a green landscape. A sound resembling laughter. Then, abruptly, a spike of distress. Rapid breathing. Darkness. Isolation. Vale blinked, momentarily disoriented by the intensity of the emotional waveform. This is not dream static, he said. The brain is replaying experiential memory, Rel whispered. Is that unusual? Vale did not answer immediately. Many species processed memory during rest, but this felt immersive almost. Relived rather than reviewed. The human's heart rate climbed, muscles tensing slightly as if responding to invisible stimuli. Reduce scan intensity, Vale ordered. But before the system could comply, the human's fingers twitched. Every staff member froze. The movement was small, barely noticeable, yet it shattered the fragile assumption that the patient was passive. Vale felt his neural ridges tighten again. He had examined dangerous organisms before, predators capable of dissolving bone or emitting neurotoxins, but this felt different. There was no visible threat, only unpredictability. The human's lips parted slightly, releasing a faint sound. At first, it resembled random vibration, but the station's translation grid attempted interpretation anyway. A soft waveform appeared on the monitor, unresolved, looping as the system searched for linguistic patterns. Vale stepped closer, lowering his auditory receptors. The sound came again, fragile but unmistakably intentional. A word. Hello. The translation grid locked, displaying the output with hesitant certainty. Rel's glow flickered in. Shock. It is conscious? Not fully, Vale replied, though doubt edged his tone. He studied the face again, eyelids still closed, breathing steady. Yet somewhere beneath that stillness, awareness stirred like an animal testing the edges of sleep. Vale felt an unfamiliar sensation, not fear this time, but anticipation laced with discomfort. What species vocalizes during sedation? Rel asked. Vale searched his memory archives. Several. None with this emotional modulation. The human's heart rate began to climb again, breaking synchronization with Vale's and accelerating independently. Neural activity spiked across multiple regions, lighting the display like a constellation in motion. Then the human's brow furrowed. A tear formed at the corner of one eye. It slid slowly down the temple, glistening under surgical light before disappearing into the fabric beneath. The entire chamber remained silent as the single drop completed its journey. Rel spoke first, barely audible. Is that fluid discharge? From pain response? Vale stared at the tears trail. No physical stimulus detected. Then why? It is emotional expression, Vale interrupted. The realization hung in the air, strange and unsettling. An organism capable of producing liquid signals purely from internal experience, without injury or environmental trigger. Vale felt his logical frameworks straining again. Record biochemical composition, he said. The analysis returned quickly. Salt, water, trace proteins, harmless, meaningless, and yet profoundly disturbing. The human shifted again, this time turning its head slightly toward Vale's position, as if sensing observation despite closed eyes. Monitors chimed with rising. Neural complexity. The memory stream intensified, projecting fragmented impressions faster than translation could stabilize. Faces, voices, warmth, loss, hope, fear, all layered together, overlapping, refusing to separate into neat categories. Vale felt something. Inside his own mind echo faintly, an empathetic resonance he had never experienced with any other species. He stepped back instinctively. "Doctor?" Rel asked. Vale did not respond, because for a brief, impossible moment, he thought he understood what the human was feeling. And that possibility was far more unsettling than any biological anomaly. Suddenly, every monitor in the chamber emitted a sharp tone. The neural mapping display expanded automatically, highlighting a rapidly forming pattern at the center of the human's brain, a structure activating that had remained dormant until now. Vale leaned forward, scanning the label generated by the system. Unknown function. High complexity. The human's eyelids fluttered. Once, twice, then stopped. Vale felt the station's perfect silence tighten around him as a single realization, formed with chilling clarity. The examination was no longer one-sided. Somehow, the patient was beginning to observe them back. The idea that the examination could be reciprocal felt irrational, almost absurd. And yet the data on the monitors refused to support that comforting assumption. Neural activity continued to organize itself into increasingly complex patterns. Even though the human's eyes remained closed, it resembled the brain state of an organism actively processing external stimuli. "Is the sensory grid leaking?" Vale asked quietly. Rel checked her console immediately. Negative. Chamber isolation intact. No one answered, because no one knew. The human's breathing deepened slightly, chest rising and falling with greater amplitude. Muscles along the jaw tightened and released, micro-expressions surfacing like ripples across calm water. Vale had studied thousands of facial structures, but this one seemed uniquely expressive. Auditory scan around the human's head. A faint pattern emerged, subvocal. Neural firing. The human was forming language internally. "It is thinking," Vale murmured. Rel tilted her head. "All organisms think." "Yes," Vale replied, "but most do not simulate conversation while unconscious." The translation? Grid attempted to capture fragments from neural speech centers. Incomplete phonetic bursts appeared and vanished before stabilization, like echoes from another room. Where? Alone. Home. Each fragment carried emotional weight disproportionate to its brevity. Ridges tightened again, not from fear, but from the growing awareness that this organism possessed an internal narrative far richer than its physical simplicity suggested. "Doctor," another technician whispered, "should we awaken it?" Vale considered the question carefully. He said dot, as if resisting that decision. The human's brain activity spiked again. Emotional processing centers ignited alongside memory recall pathways. Crowded environment filled with moving figures. Voices layered over one another, bright artificial lights. Feeling translated as anticipation. Then abruptly, isolation. Silence. A confined space. Vale's eyes narrowed. The capsule. The human was remembering its transport. Stress indicators surged through its body despite sedation. He said. Rel's glow dimmed further. Vale did not disagree, yet something about the intensity of the human's recollection suggested another interpretation. Not inefficiency. Motion. Every member of the medical team froze again. A hand hovered in the air for a second, before lowering back down, fingers curling weakly around nothing. But the gesture was unmistakable. It was searching for contact that was not there. Vale felt a strange pressure inside. His cognitive core. Loneliness. The translation grid had mapped the emotional signature clearly. Rel spoke softly. It believes it is alone. The crowded chamber, filled with advanced beings, instruments, and systems. And yet, from the human's perspective, it was. That realization lingered longer than Vale expected. Reduce memory feedback, he ordered. The system attempted to dampen neural recall loops, but the effect was minimal. The human's brain compensated instantly, rerouting activity through alternate pathways. Adaptive, flexible, resistant to control. Vale felt a flicker of professional admiration, mixed with unease. Doctor, structural scan update, Rel said suddenly. New display appeared, highlighting micro-movements across the human's body. Subtle muscle contractions, autonomic adjustments, immune responses recalibrating moment by moment. It is responding to sedation dynamically, Rel explained. Metabolic pathways adjusting dosage impact. Within minutes, a species capable of internally modeling foreign chemistry and adapting in real time was biologically extraordinary. Humans' eyelids trembled again, this time longer. Vale stepped forward before he realized he had decided to. The human's lips moved once more, forming a whisper too faint for natural hearing. But the translation grid captured it. Can you hear me? The words appeared on the monitor with quiet certainty. No one in the chamber spoke, because answering would violate protocol, because acknowledging communication would redefine the situation entirely, because none of them were prepared for dialogue. Slow and unsettling. Every species the collective studied either resisted examination or remained indifferent. But this one seemed to seek connection, even while restrained, sedated, and alone. The human's heart rate began synchronizing again, not with the Vale this time, with the ambient neural rhythms of everyone in the room. A statistical impossibility. Yet the monitors displayed gradual convergence across multiple biometric signals, subtle but measurable. Shared emotional resonance. The chamber felt quieter, heavier, as if the air itself had thickened with unspoken awareness. Vale's logical frameworks strained once more. What kind of organism influences others without contact? Rel whispered. Vale did not answer immediately, because he was beginning to suspect the truth. And the truth was far more complex than physiology. Before he could speak, the central display emitted a sharp alert. The unknown function region in the human brain had fully activated. New classification attempt initiated. Processing. Then the label appeared. Social cognition core. Extreme capacity. Vale stared at the words. A slow realization, unfolding like a distant storm approaching. A human was not dangerous because of claws, toxins, or strength. It was dangerous because it understood others, because it felt others, because even unconscious, it was reaching outward, mapping minds, seeking bonds. The human's eyelids fluttered once more, and this time, they began to open. The human's eyes opened slowly, not wide in panic, not confused the way most sedated patients behaved. They opened like someone waking up in a place they expected to be. Dark pupils adjusted to the surgical lights, and the first thing the human did was not look around the chamber. It looked directly at Dr. Vale. Vale felt his throat tighten. That was impossible. It should not have known where the authorities stood. And the voice came out dry. Dr. Vale. Once, Rel's bioluminescence dimmed to near darkness. No one had. The human shouldn't even have the sound pattern for his designation, yet it said it perfectly, shaped by a mouth built for a different atmosphere. Vale forced his hands to remain steady and stepped closer. How do you know that name? The human swallowed, eyes half-lidded like it was choosing words carefully. You keep thinking it, it whispered. You think it like a shield. He had studied telepathic species before, but their abilities were chemical, pheromonal, or electromagnetic, always measurable, always limited to short range. This was different. The human wasn't projecting forcefully. It was simply LISTENINGA. Warning symbol flashed on the neural display. The social cognition core was expanding, recruiting new regions, forming bridges between emotion, memory, language, and prediction. Rel whispered, Doctor, it's coupling to us. Vale stared. The human's brain map. The pattern wasn't random. It wasn't chaos. It was a model. A living simulation of the room. The human was building a complete map of every mind present, not by reading thoughts like stolen data, but by predicting them through microsignals. It was doing what predators did, but with feelings instead of teeth. Vale felt his own pulse quicken, and again the human's pulse followed. Not delayed now. Instant. Like one system. Stop the scan? Vale ordered sharply. The tendrils pulled back, but the monitors didn't calm. The human's neural network kept accelerating, not because of the machines, but because of the people. The more they reacted, the more it learned. The human turned its head slightly, eyes drifting over the team. Its gaze softened in a way that made no biological sense to Vale. It looked at them like they were not threats, not strangers, but something familiar. Then it said, Rel flinched. We are assessing an unknown organism. Fear is irrelevant. That's a lie you tell yourself. Your hands are steady, but your mind is loud. Vale's neural ridges tightened. What are you? The human blinked slowly. Human. The human's expression changed at that, and the shift was so sharp that several staff members instinctively stiffened. The calm layer peeled back, revealing something older and heavier underneath. The human's voice stayed soft, but the meaning carried weight like gravity. We're a social species, it said. We don't survive alone. So our bodies learned a different kind of weapon. Vale's eyes narrowed. Weapon? The human's gaze returned to him. Connection. At that moment, the holodisplay changed without command. The system displayed a new analysis from a deeper layer of the scan, something it had missed because it didn't know what to look for. It highlighted clusters not in the brain, but throughout the human's body, dense networks of nerve endings in the skin, specialized cells around the heart, chemical feedback loops tied directly to immune response. Vale read the automated label, and his breath stopped. Threat response linked to social perception. The human's immune system wasn't only fighting microbes. It was reacting to emotions, to intent, to social threat. Like an army that mobilized not just against disease, but against rejection, isolation, betrayal. That is impossible, Vale whispered. The human's eyes didn't move. It's not. When we're scared, we get stronger. When we're angry, we endure more pain. When we're desperate, we do things that shock even us. Vale felt a chill spread through his core. He had assumed the human was fragile because its skin was soft and its bones could break, built to suffer and still function, built to adapt under stress because stress was the normal environment of its species. Then the big twist arrived, but as a cold fact, the neural translation grid finished reconstructing the corrupted capsule logs. A final message appeared. Pod, not an accident, Delivery confirmed. Vale stared at the text until his vision blurred. Delivery confirmed. This human hadn't drifted into collective territory by mistake. It had been sent. Rel's voice shook. Doctor, does that mean it's an envoy? The human exhaled slowly, and for the first time it looked truly tired. I didn't want to come like this, it said. But you don't answer signals you don't feel. You ignore what you can keep distant. Vale's mind raced. Who sent you? The human's gaze sharpened. My people. And why? Vale demanded. The human's voice stayed gentle, but the words hit like a blade. To make sure you... Vale felt a pressure behind his eyes, like something pushing from the inside. He realized, with horror, that it wasn't physical. It was emotional. The human wasn't forcing images into his mind with telepathy. It was doing something worse. It was making him feel. A memory flooded Vale's perception, not as a picture, on a screen, but as lived experience. Cold rain, mud, smoke, a human voice screaming a name, the metallic smell of blood, hands shaking while trying to save someone who is already gone. Then, immediately after, another memory layered over it. Warmth, laughter, a small child falling asleep against a chest, the deep ache of love so strong it bordered on pain. Vale staggered back. His breathing hitched. Around him, the technicians reacted the same way. One dropped to their knees. Another covered their sensory ridges, trembling. Rel's skin flickered wildly as her body tried to process emotions it had never evolved to. Carry. Vale understood then. This was the human's true biology. Not venom. Contagious inner reality. Humans didn't just communicate. They transferred experience. They infected others with meaning, with grief, with loyalty, with rage, with hope. And once that happened, distance was no longer possible. Vale looked at the human, and the human looked back with exhausted honesty. I'm not here to hurt you, it whispered, but you're going to stop treating us like a specimen. Vale's hands finally shook. For the first time in his career, he didn't trust his own precision. Because every second he stayed, the human's model of him grew deeper. Every reaction he had gave the human more access, more understanding, more influence. Dr. Vale did the unthinkable. He stepped away from the platform. He raised his hand, palm open, a universal signal for termination of procedure. End examination, he said, voice tight. Rel stared at him. Doctor, protocol. Vale cut her off, eyes still fixed on the human. I am quitting this case. The chamber fell silent, not because the human was threatening them, but because Vale finally understood the terrifying truth. A human didn't need to escape restraints to be dangerous. It only needed you to care. Dr. Vale stood motionless beside the examination platform, his open palm still raised, the gesture of termination hanging in the sterile air. No alarm sounded. No automated voice challenged his authority. Orbital Station Kepri trusted its surgeons absolutely, and Vale had just done something unprecedented. He had abandoned an examination, not because of physical risk, but because of emotional exposure. Around him, the medical team struggled silently. Some avoided looking at this human. Others stared openly, expressions caught between fascination and discomfort. The room felt different now, less like a laboratory, and more like a place where something personal had happened, something irreversible. The human watched Vale carefully, not with triumph, not with hostility, but with understanding that felt almost unsettling. You don't have to be afraid, the human said softly. Vale let out a slow breath. That is precisely why I'm afraid. The human tilted its head slightly, curiosity replacing exhaustion for a moment. Because you felt something? Vale hesitated, searching for words that did not exist in collective language. His species experienced cooperation, coordination, shared goals, but not this raw internal resonance that blurred boundaries between individuals. You showed me loss, Vale said quietly, and attachment, and the willingness to continue. Despite both, the human's gaze lowered. That's just being human. Vale almost laughed, a sound his anatomy rarely produced. Just. The simplicity of that word clashed violently with the complexity he had witnessed. He turned toward the observation window, staring out at the scattered stars. For thousands of cycles, the collective has classified life by threat vectors, Vale said. Strength, intelligence, reproduction rate, technological capacity. You possess all of these only moderately. He paused. But your internal experiences, Vale continued, they propagate, they alter behavior, they reshape decisions. The human smiled faintly. We call that caring. Vale turned back, and the tremor in his hands had not fully disappeared. It is more than caring. It is a form of biological influence we cannot shield against. You generate bonds that override logic, motivate sacrifice, destabilize neutrality. Rel listened quietly, her glow steady for the first time since the awakening. The human inhaled slowly. Is that why you quit? Vale met its gaze. Yes. Silence settled again, but this time it felt gentle rather than tense. After a moment, the human spoke. My people didn't send me as a threat. Vale nodded. I know. We kept broadcasting, but you observed without responding, studied without acknowledging. Vale felt the truth of that statement settle heavily inside him. The collective had detected humanity decades earlier, watching quietly, gathering data, waiting for clear classification before initiating contact, waiting for certainty. But certainty is not how your species functions. Vale said. The human chuckled weakly. Not even close. Vale stepped closer again, but this time without instruments, without barriers of role or protocol. Just two beings sharing space. What do you want now? He asked. The human's answer came without hesitation. Recognition. Vale absorbed the word slowly. Not alliance. Not technology exchange. Not territory negotiation. Not recognition. Double quotes. To be seen as people, the human clarified. Not data. Vale felt something settle inside his cognitive core. A quiet realignment of perspective. All his life he had believed understanding required dissection, analysis, separation of subject and observer. But the human had demonstrated another method entirely. Participation, feeling alongside. You have achieved that, Vale said. The human's shoulders relaxed slightly, as if carrying less invisible weight. Outside the chamber, the station continued. Its perfect orbit, unaware that a paradigm had shifted within one room. Rel stepped forward carefully. Doctor, what will you report? Vale considered the question for a long moment. His report would ripple through the collective, shaping policy, perception, and future contact. Words would matter. Finally, he answered. I will report that humanity is not biologically threatening, Vale said, but prolonged exposure results in significant cognitive and emotional alteration. Rel blinked. That sounds alarming. Vale's gaze softened. It is. The human watched him, waiting. Vale continued, voice calm but resolute. I will recommend immediate diplomatic recognition. A quiet breath left the human, almost a laugh, almost relief. Thank you. It whispered. Val studied the human one last time as a patient, and then, deliberately, he stopped seeing a patient at all. Before I leave, Vale said, there is something I must ask. The human nodded. When you said your species' weapon is connection, do you consider it a weapon? The human thought for a moment, eyes drifting toward the stars beyond the glass. No, it said finally. But it can be terrifying to those who've never felt it. Vale understood. That was why the surgical lights had flickered. Not because the station was malfunctioning, but because the moment had exceeded the assumptions its systems were built upon. An unknown variable had entered not the machinery, but the minds operating it. Vale deactivated his surgical interface. Metallic tendrils folded away, ceiling panels sealing seamlessly, as if the examination had never begun. He turned to leave, then paused at the doorway behind him. The human lay on the platform, smaller than most interstellar beings, physically. Fragile. Contained within a room designed for analysis. Yet Vale knew something the collective did not. This species would cross galaxies not through force, but through stories, relationships, shared emotions, carried from one mind to another like quiet starlight. They would transform civilizations simply by being understood. Vale looked back one final time. "You altered me," he said. The human smiled gently. "That's how we say hello." Vale stepped into the corridor, the door dissolving shut behind him with a soft whisper. For the first time in his career, Dr. Vale was no longer certain where the boundary between observer and subject existed. Somewhere inside orbital station Kepri, a human rested peacefully, the most dangerous patient the collective had ever encountered. Because anyone who met one would never remain unchanged.